let gallows gape for dog, let man go free. Henry V. A page had been brought up in Gamwell Hall, who, while he was little, had been called Little John, and continued to be so called after he had grown to be a foot taller than any other man in the house. He was full 7 feet high. His latitude was worthy of his longitude, and his strength was worthy of both, and though an honest man by profession, he had practiced archery on the king's deer for the benefit of his master's household, and for the improvement of his own eye and hand, till his aim had become infallible within the range of 2 miles. He had fought manfully in defense of his young master, took his captivity exceedingly to heart, and fell into bitter grief and boundless rage when he heard that he had been tried in Nottingham and sentenced to die. Alice Gamwell, at Little John's request, wrote 3 letters of 1 tenor, and Little John, having attached them to 3 blunt arrows, saddled the fleetest steed in old Sir Guy of Gamwell's stables, mounted, and rode first to Arlingford Castle, where he shot one of the 3 arrows over the battlements, then to Rubygill Abbey, where he shot the second into the Abbey garden, then back past Gamwell Hall to the borders of Sherwood Forest, where he shot the 3rd into the wood. Now the first of these arrows lighted in the nape of the neck of Lord Fitzwater, and lodged itself firmly between his skin and his collar. The second rebounded with the hollow vibration of a drumstick from the shaven sconce of the Abbot of Rubygill, and the 3rd pitched perpendicularly into the center of a venison pasty in which Robin Hood was making incision. Matilda ran up to her father in the court of Arlingford Castle, seized the arrow, drew off the letter, and concealed it in her bosom before the Baron had time to look round, which she did with many expressions of rage against the impudent villain who had shot a blunt arrow into the nape of his neck. "But you know, father," said Matilda, "a sharp arrow in the same place would have killed you, therefore the sending a blunt one was very considerate." "Considerate, with a vengeance," said the Baron. "Where was the consideration of sending it at all? This is some of your forester's pranks. He has missed you in the forest, since I have kept watch and ward over you, and by way of a love token and a remembrance to you takes a random shot at me." The Abbot of Rubygill picked up the missive or messenger arrow, which had rebounded from his shaven crown, with a very unghostly malediction on the sender, which he suddenly checked with a pious and consolatory reflection on the goodness of Providence in having blessed him with such a thickness of skull, to which he was now indebted for temporal preservation, as he had before been for spiritual promotion. He opened the letter, which was addressed to Father Michael, and found it to contain an intimation that William Gamwell was to be hanged on Monday at Nottingham. "And I wish," said the abbot, "Father Michael were to be hanged with him, an ungrateful monster, after I had rescued him from the fangs of civil justice, to reward my lenity by not leaving a bone unbruised among the holy brotherhood of Rubygill." Robin Hood extracted from his venison pasty a similar intimation of the evil destiny of his cousin, whom he determined, if possible, to rescue from the jaws of Cerberus. The Sheriff of Nottingham, though still sore with his bruises, was so intent on revenge, that he raised himself from his bed to attend the execution of William Gamwell. He rode to the august structure of retributive Themis, as the French call a gallows, in all the pride and pomp of shrievalty, and with a splendid retinue of well-equipped knaves and varlets, as our ancestors called honest serving-men. Young Gamwell was brought forth with his arms pinioned behind him, his sister Alice and his father, Sir Guy, attending him in disconsolate mood. He had rejected the confessor provided by the sheriff, and had insisted on the privilege of choosing his own, whom Little John had promised to bring. Little John, however, had not made his appearance when the fatal procession began its march, but when they reached the place of execution, Little John appeared, accompanied by a ghostly friar. "Sheriff," said young Gamwell, "let me not die with my hands pinioned. Give me a sword, and set any odds of your men against me, and let me die the death of a man, like the descendant of a noble house, which has never yet been stained with ignominy." "No, no," said the sheriff, "I have had enough of setting odds against you. I have sworn you shall be hanged, and hanged you shall be." "Then God have mercy on me," said young Gamwell, "and now, holy friar, shrive my sinful soul." The friar approached. "Let me see this friar," said the sheriff. "If he be the friar of the bridge, I had as lief have the devil in Nottingham, but he shall find me too much for him here. The Friar of the Bridge, said Little John, as you very well know, Sheriff, was Father Michael of Rubygill Abbey, and you may easily see that this is not the man. I see it, said the Sheriff, and God be thanked for his absence. Young Gamwell stood at the foot of the ladder. The friar approached him, opened his book, groaned, turned up the whites of his eyes, tossed up his arms in the air, and said, Dominus vobiscum. He then crossed both his hands on his breast under the folds of his holy robes, and stood a few moments as if in inward prayer. A deep silence among the attendant crowd accompanied this action of the friar, interrupted only by the hollow tone of the death bell, at long and dreary intervals. Suddenly the friar threw off his holy robes, and appeared a forester clothed in green, with a sword in his right hand and a horn in his left. With the sword he cut the bonds of William Gamwell, who instantly snatched a sword from one of the sheriff's men, and with the horn he blew a loud blast, which was answered at once by 4 bugles from the quarters of the 4 winds, and from each quarter came 25 bowmen running all on a row. Treason! Treason! Cried the sheriff. Old Sir Guy sprang to his son's side, and so did Little John, and the 4 setting back to back, kept the sheriff and his men at bay till the bowmen came within shot and let fly their arrows among the sheriff's men, who, after a brief resistance, fled in all directions. The forester, who had personated the friar, sent an arrow after the flying sheriff, calling with a strong voice, to the sheriff's left arm, as a keepsake from Robin Hood. The arrow reached its destiny, the sheriff redoubled his speed, and, with the one arrow in his arm, did not stop to breathe till he was out of reach of another. The foresters did not waste time in Nottingham, but were soon at a distance from its walls. Sir Guy returned with Alice to Gamwell Hall, but thinking he should not be safe there, from the share he had had in his son's rescue, they only remained long enough to supply themselves with clothes and money, and departed, under the escort of Little John, to another seat of the Gamwells in Yorkshire. Young Gamwell, taking it for granted that his offence was past remission, determined on joining Robin Hood, and accompanied him to the forest, where it was deemed expedient that he should change his name, and he was rechristened without a priest, and with wine instead of water, by the immortal name of Scarlet.